Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take a whole stack of information, articles, research, all our notes, and we really boil it down to the most important insights for you, our listener. Today, we're plunging into a topic that, well, it touches so many of us. How our thoughts shape our feelings. It's a big one. And we're looking at a really powerful tool that can help us navigate that connection. Think of it like a shortcut, maybe, to getting well informed about something that can seriously impact your day-to-day well-being.
Indeed. And we've sifted through quite a bit of research here to really understand a practical approach to mental well-being. We're focusing specifically on a tool that you often hear about in therapy contexts, but honestly, it's just as valuable as a skill for personal growth for anyone. So our mission today is to unpack what this thing is, how it actually works, why the research says it's effective, and maybe how you might start using it yourself or find support if you want to explore it more.
Okay, let's get into it then. We're talking about something called a CBT journal, or maybe you've heard it called a thought diary. You might have heard the term floating around, but maybe never fully grasped, what it can really do, its potential.
Right. At its heart, a CBT journal is really a structured way, a systematic method for you to track and, crucially, analyze your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors. See how they link up. It's a tool for something called cognitive restructuring. That sounds a bit technical, but it's basically about recognizing and then actively changing those distorted thinking patterns that can get us stuck.
Okay, so instead of just letting those automatic negative thoughts kind of run wild in our heads,
Yeah.
this journal actually makes us stop. Identify where our thinking might be, well, a bit off, biased or inaccurate, maybe.
Exactly that. The fundamental goal is to help you first spot and then challenge the accuracy of those automatic negative thoughts, the ones that often fuel things like anxiety or depression. And over time, as you do this consistently, you build up a much deeper understanding of your own cognitive processes, your own mind, which allows you to shift towards more balanced, more rational ways of thinking.
That sounds really useful. But, I can hear listeners maybe wondering, okay, we're doing all this introspection, but why? What does it actually lead to? Does the research show it helps with real stuff, like anxiety or stress?
Yeah, that's a key question, absolutely. And the research is actually quite clear on this. These CBT approaches, and that includes using thought records or journals, they are effective. Widely recognized as effective for common mental health challenges and anxiety, depression, stress. Study after study shows that challenging your beliefs, which is what the journal helps you do, can significantly reduce distress. For instance, it's been shown to decrease anxious beliefs and the physical symptoms of anxiety compared to doing nothing at all.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. It sounds like it's not just about noticing the thoughts, but actively, working to shift them, changing them somehow.
That's exactly right. You essentially become your own detective, your own Socratic questioner, but on paper.
Mm.
It's quite empowering, actually. Let's look at some common ways this is structured, how you actually do it.
Yeah, the research we looked at describes a few different formats, but they seem to share the same core ideas. Let's start with maybe a basic one, the four-column thought diary.
Good place to start. Okay, so column one, situation. First, you just describe the context. What triggered the feeling? Be objective, keep it brief. Something like waiting at a restaurant, friend was late. Simple as that.
Okay, situation, got it. But
Column two, feelings. Write down the emotions you felt, and importantly, rate how strong they were. Maybe 0 to 100%. Try to stick to single words if you can, like hurt, rejected, 85% intensity.
right, feeling and intensity makes sense. Column three.
Column three, automatic thought. This is really key. You identify the main negative thought or assumption that just popped into your head. It's often your interpretation of the situation. So instead of just, what if she doesn't show? It might be something deeper, like, she doesn't want to spend time with me. She probably doesn't like me anymore. I'm going to end up alone. You see how quick that can spiral?
Wow, yeah, that immediate jump. Okay, so that's the thought. What's the last column?
The fourth column, thinking, errors, and challenge. Or sometimes just challenge. Here, you look back at that automatic thought. You try to spot any unhelpful thinking patterns, those cognitive distortions we mentioned. Was it jumping to conclusions, catastrophizing? And after you name the distortion, you challenge the thought.
Yeah.
You look for facts you might have missed. Ask yourself, okay, what actually happened here? Could there be another explanation?
This reminds me so much of that example from the research Alice, the 78-year-old client. Remember her? When her friend missed lunch, she wrote down those exact kinds of thoughts. Shirley didn't show because she doesn't want to spend time with me. No one likes me. I'll always end up alone. Just heartbreaking thoughts. But then, using the journal, she identified jumping to conclusions and overgeneralization. She looked for evidence and found out Shirley had just gone to the wrong restaurant.
Exactly. A simple mix-up.
And her feeling of rejection just, poof, diminished. It's such a powerful reality check, isn't it?
It really is. And, the research also mentions the ABC or ABCD model. It comes from rational emotive behavior therapy, which was kind of a precursor to CBT. It makes a simple but profound point. Adversities, A, the situations don't directly cause our emotional consequences. C, it's our beliefs. B, about those events that determine how we react. And the D is for disputing those irrational beliefs. It fits perfectly with the journal idea.
Right, that model really clarifies the B, the belief part. And I saw the research outlines an extended 7-column thought record based on this.
Oh.
It seems a bit more detailed.
Yeah, it adds a bit more nuance. Let's quickly run through that one too. Column 1, situation. Same as before, what, who, when, where. Column 2, feelings, initial. Emotions and intensity again. Column 3, automatic thoughts. Those immediate interpretations, the self-talk. Column 4, evidence for the thought. Now you actively list facts that seem to back it up.
Okay, so you acknowledge why you might believe it first.
Exactly. Then, column 5, evidence against the thought. What facts contradict it? This is where you might ask things like, what would I tell a friend? Or, are there other ways to look at this? Column 6, alternative thought. Based on all that evidence, what's a more balanced, realistic perspective? And finally, column 7, outcome. New feelings. How have your feelings changed now? What's the intensity?
That sounds really thorough. It forces you to weigh the evidence.
It does. There's another good example in the research. Someone missed a work deadline. Initial thought, I'll be fired, I'm a total failure. Classic catastrophizing. But using the 7 columns, examining evidence for and against, they reached a more balanced thought. Okay, missing this deadline is a problem, yes, I need to fix it. But it doesn't mean I'm incompetent overall.
Right.
I can apologize, get the report in ASAP. My boss will probably understand, especially given my usual track record. And the feeling shifted from panic to, well, maybe concern, but also relief.
That makes such a difference. So, okay, we have these structures, the 4-column, the 7-column. But what are the actual techniques that make this work? The research mentioned specific things, right?
Yes, definitely. Regardless of the column format, a few techniques are really central. First, as we touched on, identifying cognitive distortions. These are those systematic biases, those mental shortcuts that often go wrong, skewing things negatively. Aaron Beck identified these. They feel incredibly true in the moment, but they're based on faulty logic. We should maybe list a few common ones.
Yeah, let's do that. It helps to have names for them.
Okay. There's all or nothing thinking, seeing things in black and white. If I'm not perfect, I'm a failure. No middle ground. Overgeneralization. Taking one negative event and making it a rule. I failed this test, so I'll fail every test. Jumping to conclusions. 2 types here. Mind reading, assuming you know what others think negatively about you. And fortune telling, predicting a negative outcome with no real basis.
Right, like assuming your friend is mad because they didn't text back immediately.
Exactly. Then there's catastrophizing, blowing things way out of proportion,
Sure.
turning a small setback into a disaster. Emotional reasoning. I feel anxious, therefore something bad must be about to happen. Believing feelings are facts. And labeling. Turning a single mistake into a global negative identity, I made a mistake, becomes I am an idiot.
It's amazing how many ways our thinking can get twisted. So identifying these is step 1. How do we fight back?
That's where the second technique comes in, Socratic questioning. You become your own gentle interrogator. You ask those probing questions. Okay, what's the actual evidence for this thought? What's the evidence against it? Okay, are there any alternative explanations here? What's the worst that could realistically happen? And importantly, how would I cope if it did? And a really good one. What would I tell my best friend if they came to me with this exact thought? We're often kinder to others.
That last one is powerful, puts things in perspective. Okay, so we question the thought. Then what?
Then you work on developing alternative thoughts. This is the third key technique. The goal isn't just thinking happy thoughts. That's not CBT. It's about crafting a balanced, evidence-based thought, something realistic, incorporating maybe self-compassion. What would that kind, rational friend say? And the research suggests you check. Does this new thought actually reduce your distress? Does it feel more true and less painful?
So it's about finding a thought that's both realistic and helpful.
Precisely. And there's one more technique that adds an active element. Behavioral experiments. This is where you don't just stay in your head or your journal. You plan small, real-world tests of your fears or assumptions. Then you record what actually happened in your journal. Did your worst fear come true? Probably not. It encourages curiosity, helps you gather undeniable evidence, and builds confidence. Your journal becomes like a A lab notebook for your life.
A lab notebook for life. I like that. Okay, so we've covered the how. Let's talk about the why. Beyond just filling out columns, what are the big picture benefits people might actually see from doing this regularly?
Well, the research points to a whole range of benefits, really. First, definitely increase self-awareness.
Yeah.
Just start seeing your patterns, your triggers much more clearly. Then, as we said, improved mood and symptom reduction. It genuinely helps lift symptoms of anxiety, depression, stress. That's a major one. You get enhanced coping and problem-solving skills because you're actively practicing replacing unhelpful thoughts with more constructive ones. Often, people find better communication in relationships. When you understand your own stuff better, you tend to interact more healthily.
That makes sense if you're less reactive internally.
Exactly. It can also help with goal setting and achievement, giving you a structured way to track progress if you're working on changing behaviors linked to thoughts. And ultimately, it all contributes to this general sense of overall well-being, a better quality of life.
Something I found really interesting in the research was the emphasis on quantifying things, like rating the emotion intensity or how much you believe a thought, that 0 to 100% scale. Why is that specific part so important?
Ah, yes, the quantification. It's vital because it turns something subjective, a feeling, a belief, into measurable data. This lets you track change objectively over time. If your belief in I'm a failure drops from 90% before challenging it down to maybe 20% after, that's concrete feedback. It shows you the technique is working, which reinforces your motivation to keep practicing. It creates this sort of personal scientific feedback loop.
A feedback loop for personal growth.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And it's also really clear, reading the research, this isn't magic. It's not a one-time fix. Consistency is key.
Absolutely crucial. That's why therapists often assign thought records as homework. Regular practice is what builds the skill. You're training your brain, essentially.
Yeah.
The ultimate goal is that you start doing this process more automatically internally in everyday life. You catch a negative thought and instinctively ask yourself, hang on, what's the evidence here? Is there another way to see this? It becomes second nature.
And the great thing, as the research highlights, is how adaptable it is. It's not just for, say, depression, right?
Not at all. It's incredibly versatile.
Mhm.
Someone with anxiety can use it to challenge those what-if catastrophic predictions. Someone with depression can use it to fight back against those heavy, hopeless beliefs. Anyone under stress can use it to just untangle their thoughts, get some clarity, find a more constructive path forward. It really functions as both a clinical tool and a fundamental life skill. It builds self-management, resilience.
Okay, let's talk a bit more about the broader research findings. We know it's effective, but did the studies reveal anything specific about how effective or maybe in which situations?
Yeah, looking at the bigger picture, like meta-analyses that combined results from many studies, they generally confirm its value. One large analysis found that journaling interventions led to, on average, about a 5% reduction in scores on mental health measures compared to control groups who didn't journal. But it showed even greater benefits in specific areas, about a 9% reduction for anxiety symptoms, 6% for PTSD symptoms. And it still showed a benefit for depression, too, helping reduce those scores more than in the control groups. So the evidence is pretty solid across the board, but maybe particularly strong for anxiety-related issues.
Interesting. And I remember that surprising point you mentioned earlier about the journals not being collected. What else did the research say about what makes journaling work better or what challenges people face?
Right. That finding about journals not being collected was fascinating. It really points to the importance of privacy and honesty. Feeling safe to write without fear of judgment seems key. The research also pointed out a potential weakness in some studies, a lack of preparation or education for the participants. It suggests that just handing someone a worksheet isn't enough. Journaling as a technique really benefits from some initial guidance, maybe coaching, and definitely practice. You need to understand why and how you're doing it.
That makes total sense. You need the context. What about people who just find it hard? Like
Yeah.
maybe they struggle to even identify their thoughts or feelings when they're really upset. Does the research offer tips for that?
It does, and that's a common hurdle. When emotions are really intense, pinpointing the exact thought can be tricky. The research suggests focusing on what they call alarm situations, those moments when your symptoms, whether it's anxiety, sadness, anger, whatever, are peaking. Use that intense feeling as a signal, a starting point, then work backwards. Okay, I feel awful right now. What was going through my mind just before this? Or, if identifying the emotion is hard, maybe focus on the physical signs first. My face is flushed. My hands are shaking. What does that usually mean for me? What might be the thought behind that? Patience is really key here. It gets easier with practice. Recognizing those internal cues becomes more manageable over time.
Okay, patience is important. What about just keeping it up? It sounds like meaningful work, but maybe demanding work too. How do you stay motivated?
That's another very real challenge. The research is upfront about this. Working through difficult emotional stuff is demanding. You shouldn't expect overnight miracles. Progress takes time and consistent effort. Some key strategies the research points to are, if you're working with a therapist, having a collaborative relationship really helps. Feeling like you're a team. Being open and honest, mostly with yourself in the journal. Trying to stick to a plan, even if it's just journaling a few times a week. Consistency over perfection. Having realistic expectations. Change happens incrementally. And this is important, acknowledging your successes, even small shifts. Noticing when you did manage to challenge a thought or when your feeling intensity went down even a little bit. Celebrate those wins.
Celebrating the small wins, yeah. That keeps the momentum going. Now, if this whole process sounds intriguing but maybe a bit daunting to tackle alone, the research also implicitly points towards how professional guidance can help. For example, practices that really integrate these CBT principles, like Edward Jenny and Associates.
Exactly. Their approach seems to align really well with what makes CBT, including journaling, effective. They really emphasize building that strong therapeutic relationship first. They stress that feeling understood, feeling like your therapist gets you, is probably the most crucial factor for success. They also seem focused on understanding the what and the why behind your struggles, what thoughts, feelings, or behaviors are getting in the way of you living the life you want.
So it's not just about handing out techniques, it's about that connection, that trust first.
That seems to be the foundation, yes. And then, building on that, their approach involves working collaboratively with you. They discuss techniques to manage or modify those unhelpful thoughts, help you implement coping strategies effectively, and even help you bring back enjoyable activities into your life. Together, you develop an action plan. What strategies will you try between sessions? Then you review it, see what worked, what didn't, and adjust.
So they actively encourage that homework aspect, the practice between sessions like journaling, that the research says is so vital for making CBT stick.
Precisely. They see homework and practice as essential to reinforce what happens in the therapy room. They explicitly mention identifying negative thought patterns, challenging and restructuring them, that's cognitive reframing, addressing behaviors, and building skills. And they also highlight that they can integrate other compatible, evidence-based approaches if needed, like mindfulness-based cognitive therapy or acceptance and commitment therapy, tailoring it all to your specific needs.
Okay, so wrapping this up, we've really taken a deep dive into CBT journaling today. We've gone from its core purpose, identifying and challenging those pesky automatic negative thoughts, to the practical ways you can do it, like the 4-column or 7-column methods. We've looked at those powerful techniques, spotting cognitive distortions, using Socratic questioning like a detective, developing more balanced alternative thoughts. And we've seen that solid research backs up its effectiveness for common issues like anxiety, depression, and stress.
Absolutely. And we've also touched on how professional support from practices that really understand and apply these CBT principles can significantly boost this journey. They can provide that personalized guidance, that collaborative space, and the tools to navigate the tricky parts, whether that's just getting started, identifying thoughts, or keeping the motivation going long term.
When you boil it all down, it really seems to be about learning to, well, think about your thinking. Training yourself, maybe, to respond to your own internal chatter with a bit more logic, evidence, and maybe some compassion. Kind of like you'd respond to a friend who is struggling. It sounds like a skill that builds genuine resilience and can lead to a much calmer, more balanced way of moving through the world.
That's a great way to put it. This practice equips you with internal tools for self-management. It fosters long-term mental fortitude. It's really an investment in developing life skills that go way beyond just tackling the immediate problem you started with. It enhances your overall well-being.
So that brings us to our final thought for you, our listener, to perhaps mull over. How might actively, consciously engaging with your own thinking in this kind of structured yet compassionate way, how might that transform not just your mood day to day, but maybe your entire approach to navigating life's inevitable challenges?